Hindsight is really 100%. I guess I should have been wary when my wife first came home from her job at the art gallery, buzzing with joy over a new patron. But when you trust someone completely, and she has never once, in 17 years of living together, given you the slightest bit of trouble, you want to give her a little slack at first. My initial assumption was wrong, very wrong. I'm Bobby Sprague, and my wife is Tracy. We met at a small university in the Midwest 18 years ago, started dating 17 years ago, and married 16 years ago. We had a daughter 14 years ago and a son 12 years ago. I work as a programmer for a government agency. I make good money, but not great. I was earning well enough for Tracy to be a mom while the kids were little. But 2 years ago, she decided the kids were old enough for her to spread her wings and took a job at a high-end art gallery in the city with a 30-hour work week. She had studied art in college, so the job didn't weigh Tracy down intellectually in the slightest. She could talk and walk. The gallery primarily targeted clients who live a little better off financially than we do. We live in a major Midwestern city, and there were enough people in that financial position for the gallery to do a fair amount of business. And as a privilege of her job, Tracy could socialize with these people and immerse herself briefly in their world before returning home to her regular life. Occasionally, we would both get into their world, as sometimes Tracy would be working on a large gallery show, and I would have to accompany her as a +1. I have to admit it was exciting to spend a few hours in the company of people who move and create. Computer geeks like me don't often get to hang out with CEOs, politicians, lawyers, and bank presidents. Every once in a while, Tracy would come home drunk after meeting some celebrity or influential person. My kids and I marveled that she was just going with the flow for a while, and then we would get out of her way when the reality of where she fit into the picture of life set in. Darkness was not one of Tracy's best qualities. The kids usually scattered to their rooms, often leaving me to take the brunt of her sarcastic comments about our lives for the rest of the evening. Most of the time, I just took it personally. When it came to me, I was in the garage tinkering with the car. For the past few weeks, Tracy had been all but gushing about some cool realtor who had recently become a patron of the gallery. According to Tracy, Jackson Aloysius Fairchild, a 28-year-old millionaire, had recently moved into an expensive new home and wanted artwork to adorn its walls to reflect his position in life. He generally impressed her, although she expressed the opinion that he also seemed somewhat self-absorbed. In various conversations, she noted that he was handsome, well-built, and often mentioned that he engaged in various physical activities, such as cycling and rock climbing. Tracy bragged about her new patron, so I ignored it and let her keep it up for the next 2 weeks. Then, as I expected, things died down, and I never heard another word about Jackson Aloysius Fairchild until I was introduced to him at the gallery's Christmas gala a few weeks before the holiday. I must admit that he was an impressive physical specimen, about 6'2", 190, and looked solid in his expensive Armani suit. He was also blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and extremely handsome, even from my perspective. I had not expected such a thing. I talked to him for about 30 seconds while Tracy introduced us, and in that time I noticed him looking my wife over from head to toe like a tiger at its prey. Yes, she was gorgeous that evening in her blue skirt and jacket, with a hint of cleavage showing from beneath her white blouse, but his gaze was slanted rather than admiring. Tracy seemed too preoccupied with everything going on to pay attention, but I did. Tracy went to socialize and I headed to the bar. I grabbed a shot of Jack Daniels on the rocks and found Kenny Taylor, the husband of one of my wife's co-workers, who I had met before and got along with very well. We talked a lot about sports and cars. I talked to Kenny for a bit and then did a little socializing myself. After about an hour, I noticed Tracy talking in a small group of people, and Jackson Aloysius Fairchild was completely draped around her. I walked over to the bar, grabbed her usual drink, a Riesling, and approached the group. I introduced myself, then handed Tracy her wine glass. I then quietly walked over to Tracy's right hip and removed Jackson's hand, which was resting there from her back. He didn't say a word, only smirked as he returned the hand to his body. I chatted with the group for a few minutes, then Tracy left to socialize and I headed off in another direction, making sure beforehand that Jackson wasn't following her. I expected to see Tracy minding her own business as I moved about, socializing with some of her co-workers. But after about an hour, I didn't see my wife anywhere. Looking around a second time, I didn't see Jackson either. My spidey sense failed, and I made a concerted effort to find Tracy. Not finding her in the gallery, I walked out the front door and began circling the gallery. There were small groups of people in coats standing in the parking lot talking, seemingly about to leave, but Tracy was still gone. Just then, I noticed a couple cozying up in a black Jaguar XJ. The car was started, and the couple were sitting snuggled together in the back seat. I didn't bother to check to see if it was Tracy and Jackson. I decided it was, walked over to the car and opened the door next to the woman. The occupants jumped back, so all I could ascertain was that they were, if not kissing, then close to it. "It's time to go, dear." "Now," I said in my most polite but firm tone. We just," Tracy stammered as Jackson smirked. "I don't care." "It's time to go," I said in a voice just above a whisper. "Really, Bobby, you've got to come and hear this sound system," Jackson said. "It's absolutely crystal." The stereo system was on and some concert music was playing, but I don't think any of them were listening to music. "Another time, Jackson." "We really should get going," I said in my most casual voice. I got my wife out of the car and we walked to where my Ford F-150 was parked. "Wait, I can't leave." "The party is still 2 hours away." "I have to stay the whole time and be one of the hosts," Tracy said with insistence in her voice. "If your boss has a problem with that, he can call me directly," I said. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" We actually listened to his car's sound system. "It's amazing," she said with a note of awe in her voice. "Uh-huh," I replied, but there wasn't a note of awe in my voice. Tracy continued to play innocent, and for the next couple of weeks things were quiet between us. But eventually I brightened up, and things returned to our normal existence. So a few months later, I was caught off guard when Tracy told me that she had accepted an invitation to Jackson's cottage on the lake for a 4th of July weekend. It was to be us, Tracy's boss and his wife, and 2 other married couples who were friends of Jackson's. We would leave Friday afternoon and stay until noon Sunday, and Jackson was going to grill both days, with a full bar, swimming, boating, and whatever else was available. I started to protest, but Tracy just said we'd do it, turned around and walked away from me. In fact, the weekend started off great. We spent a few hours on the lake on Jackson's rather large sailboat. The women all looked great in their bikinis, and the guys didn't look too bad in their baggy suits. Truth be told, Jackson probably had the best body of the 5 guys, though thankfully it didn't look like he was hung better than the others, and Tracy, despite being the second oldest of the 5 women, was probably the best built. Her black bikini showed off her 36 sea breasts and bubble butt without, it seemed to me, leaving too much skin showing. Jackson had set up a damn good grill in the backyard of his cottage, and he even had a fully stocked cooler with beer, wine, and ice for mixed drinks. He brought out an array of marinated steaks and started laying them out on the grill, while everyone sat in chairs by the grill and drank drinks of their choice. Jackson was acting like a gracious host, and so far was making do with Tracy, who seemed to be staying a little farther away from him than she had at Christmas. The night went splendidly, and about midnight we all dispersed to our bedrooms, and Jackson, as a single man, went alone to the master bedroom. Saturday started with a visit to a small town adjacent to the lake. It was a little tourist trap with all sorts of cute stores, and most of the women came home with a few things. We then ate a sumptuous lunch of hero sandwiches followed by a game of volleyball. After the game was over, the libations began, and in the evening, sausages and shredded pork were grilled. We enjoyed another great dinner, and after sitting around talking for a couple hours, Tracy's boss, Lou, suggested that he and I take a walk around the lake. Considering all we ate and drank, I decided it was a great idea to get ready for round 2. It took us about 30 minutes to get around the lake, and when we returned, the group had moved from the table to chairs and loungers. I wasn't too happy when I saw Tracy sitting in a chaise lounge with her back to Jackson and his arms around her waist. As we approached, Tracy smiled and got up off Jackson, but she didn't seem to be in too much of a hurry, even though she had to know I wouldn't be too pleased. She never looked me in the face, but came over and sat in the chair next to me for most of the rest of the night. Several times during the evening I caught her and Jackson's glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Like the night before, the party started to break up around midnight, but while the other 3 couples went to their bedrooms, Tracy quietly asked me to join her in the kitchen. When we got there, she looked me straight in the eye for the first time all evening and announced, "Jackson offered to let me sleep in his bed tonight. I have accepted his offer." I must have passed out and hit my head, because I thought Tracy had just told me that she was going to sleep with Jackson in his bed. I looked at her like she had 3 eyes, and she realized that I wasn't quite sure I'd heard her correctly. This has nothing to do with love. This is purely about sex, Bobby, she began. I've been completely faithful to you for 17 years. You're the only man I love. But I want to have sex with Jackson. He turns me on, and I want to see how another man feels. After tonight, I'll be your absolutely faithful wife again for the rest of our lives, but I think you owe me one night. I don't know how long I stood there with my mouth open. My wife had just told me that she was going to sleep with another man because she wanted to, and I owed her that. Only over my dead body will you sleep with him, I finally muttered. This isn't a negotiation, Bobby. Take it for what it is. Today I'm his. Tomorrow and for the rest of my life, I'll be yours. Don't be too sure of that, baby. Remember, every action has consequences. Damn it, Bobby, she said to me in a half-whisper. Do you have to see everything in such a black and white light? It's one night, for God's sake. One night, and that's it. And you're going to ruin it for everyone. One night. We never thought you'd turn out to be so uncooperative. I probably should have just kept my mouth shut and gone behind your back. But I was afraid that if you found out about it, we'd be finished. So I decided that if you found out and let me go, it wouldn't be cheating. She turned on her heel and walked away. As I walked out of the kitchen and into the living room, I saw Tracy take Jackson's hand and walk toward the master bedroom. I think the blurriness of my vision was due to the tears rolling from my eyes. I walked over to the closed bar and poured myself a shot of Jack. It took me about 5 minutes to finish it, and when I did, I walked over to the master bedroom and stood outside the door, very quietly. I could hear the sounds of two people having sex. My life as I knew it was over. I drank several shots of Jack, trying to figure out what I should do next. My first impulse was to leave and file for divorce as soon as possible. But the thought of having to give up my children for most of the time kept me on my toes. I saw nothing good in this decision for myself or for them. On the other hand, my wife was in another man's bed at this moment, and I knew I couldn't accept that. I briefly considered burning the house down and killing us all, but sanity took over. Then I seemed to black out for a while, because when I looked at the clock, it was 3 a.m, and everything was quiet in the house. Staggering, I made my way to the bedroom Tracy and I had been assigned. The bed was made up because it was empty, just as I knew it would be. I laid right down on the covers and slept soundly for the next few hours, rising at 7:30. I went to the adjoining bathroom, took a quick shower, and brushed my teeth before heading to the kitchen. 3 other couples were already up and having breakfast of scrambled eggs and bacon. Marna, Tracy's boss's wife, Lou, was obviously the head cook, and she offered me a plate while the others grumbled about their good morning. I could tell by the way everyone was looking at me with the corners of their eyes that they were well aware of what had happened. I know my face flushed and flared because the level of humiliation was off the charts. It's all right, Bobby. We've all seen it before, Marna said sympathetically, and the others nodded their heads in agreement. Jackson's done it 3 or 4 other times. He's an alpha male, and when he sees something he wants, he goes after it. That's just the way he is. I'm also inclined to think that he really enjoys humiliation, and I think women fall for it too, Lou adds. But I don't think there's anything personal about it. It's just the way he is. So what happened to the other couples he did this to? I inquired. As far as I know, they're still married. Kind of silly to splinter a marriage of many years over a one-night stand, if you think about it, Marna said. Especially with kids and all, added Joanna, one of the other wives. You mean he's looking for married women with children so the wives can use the children as leverage for an affair? I asked incredulously. I guess so, Ralph, Joanna's husband, chimed in. But he's actually a nice guy, except for one little quirk. I've known him since college, and if you're friends with him, it's a friend for life. So I can forgive him that quirk, especially since it doesn't hurt the couple in the long run. In fact, I know that last year Jackson talked his latest sweetheart and her husband into buying a condo in North Carolina, and Jackson stays with them whenever he's in the area. At that moment, we heard moans coming from the master bedroom. It was Tracy, and I could tell from the sounds that the dream with Jackson last night had obviously included this morning. Everyone at the table blushed with embarrassment, and I turned white with rage. Why don't we finish breakfast on the deck? Suggested Marna. Tracy and Jackson joined us on deck about 30 minutes later, showered and looking very pleased with themselves. I had to admit that Tracy was just radiant and didn't seem too concerned about everyone knowing what she had just been doing. She had a plate of breakfast in her hands and immediately walked over to the chaise lounge I was sitting on and sat down on the edge while I rearranged my legs for her. She had her back to me at this point, but I could see the pinkness of her back from behind her tank top. I could also make out the bite mark on her right shoulder, just under the straps of her tank top and bra. She didn't greet me with anything more than a nod as she sat down, and I saw no reason to break the silence. "So, what are everyone's plans for the afternoon?" Jackson said in his host's welcoming voice. "I think we should go back and let the kids have some time with us after lunch, don't you, honey?" I said into Tracy's back. She hesitated for a second, and from the way her hair and head moved, I realized she was rolling her eyes at me. One of those things you realize when you've been together as long as we have. Since she was sitting facing the others, they could all see her rolling her eyes, and it took a lot of effort for me not to reach up and slap her on the deceptive back of her head. "I was hoping we'd be here for a while and perhaps set sail again, dear," she replied flatly. "No. We definitely need to get back. You finish your breakfast. I'll take care of the car." "Wheels at 10, I said, heading back to the house. I loaded the car in record time. Tracy was just finishing breakfast when I returned to the deck. I grabbed her wrist, waved to everyone, hurriedly said goodbye to the rest of the group, and practically dragged Tracy to the car. I didn't need to look anyone in the eye to know what they were thinking. I knew, because I'd already thought about it. We drove in silence for the first 45 minutes, except that the radio was playing and Tracy was mostly looking out the passenger window. I think she was afraid that if she looked straight ahead and I saw her face, it would start an explosion, so she just looked away from me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Was it worth it?" I half hissed, half spoke to her. She didn't move for a couple seconds. Then I saw her take a deep breath. She turned toward me. Yes. Yes. That was wonderful," she cooed, looking somewhere in the distance. Not exactly the answer I was expecting. I didn't know what to expect, but I didn't think she would tell me the awful truth. Perhaps I expected some stuttering, a little truth, a lot of backtracking, maybe an apology, but not the whole truth. And from the look on her face, I realized that it was indeed the truth. 17 years, 2 kids, everything we've built together, and all that in one night? I asked. She turned slightly toward me in her seat and looked at me with a sad, almost resigned look. "It's up to you, Bobby," she said. "Just like I promised you, it was just a one-time thing, and now I'll be yours as devotedly as I was before last night. It was an amazing night, and now it's over. But if you can lose your love for me so quickly and destroy our family, then you're doing what you have to do. But trust me, I will take the kids and make sure they know you destroyed our family." I was stunned into silence. Not even an apology. And she blamed me for the breakup of our family. She and Jackson sure had planned it well. I'd never seen Tracy like that before, and I definitely didn't like her. "So I can assume that this morning's session with Jackson was designed to humiliate?" I asked. "Not exactly. He wanted to get one more time before I become my husband's faithful wife. He's willing to live by my rules." We stopped by a relative's house to pick up the kids. When we got there, it seemed to Tracy that nothing had changed. Even though I got along great with Tracy's parents, Ron and Judy, I could barely look them in the eye. I felt like they somehow knew that Tracy was a cuckold, and I felt ashamed and humiliated. I wanted to scream the truth about their daughter, but I knew this wasn't the time or place. The entire time we were there, Tracy had a puzzled look on her face. She was definitely enjoying my discomfort and the fact that she had the upper hand. This was definitely the wrong way to make amends, I thought to myself. At the end of the evening, Tracy climbed into bed after me. I lay facing her, and she climbed on top of me and settled on the spoon behind me. "Not tonight," I said. "There's not a damn thing you can do to get me to get up for you. You'll have to settle for what that asshole gave you last night and this morning." For the first time since Saturday night, Tracy showed weakness. She looked hurt and shocked that I had rejected her advances in one of our few moments together. "But don't you want me?" Jackson says that's almost an automatic response from men in situations like this. "Really, so he's not only a real estate genius but also a sex therapist? Then he should have warned you that some men don't take what you did as a sexual challenge. Some of us see it as a total betrayal, and vomiting may be more appropriate than sex." Tracy's eyes opened even wider than they had been. In all our 17 years together, I had never spoken to her like that and never swore at her. I rolled over onto my back and pretended to fall asleep. I could hear her crying softly. I didn't care. I made an appointment with a reputable divorce attorney for the following week. The meeting did not go well, to say the least. Marcus Rothstein had to explain to me twice that my options really came down to giving up half of my assets and the children, or waiting for the children's sake and then giving up half of my assets if we divorced when they reached adulthood. We all know parents who live their lives because of their kids, and then when the kids leave home, the parents no longer have anything in common and get divorced. That's exactly the scenario my lawyer laid out for me. Be a super parent for the next 6 years, and then divorce Tracy once the kids were no longer an issue. At least in my case, I didn't have to worry about Tracy running the streets if she was telling me the truth about keeping her promise. Here's what I did. If my kids were involved in an activity, I was usually the responsible parent and made sure Tracy was involved too. Why should I be the only one sitting in on a stamp club fundraiser or working on a 4-H woodworking project? We were the parents that everyone looks at and shakes their heads at. On the physical side, I didn't touch Tracy sexually for 6 months, until she told me that she would have to start leaving the house if I didn't want to fulfill my husbandly duties. Since I was ready to blow the dough myself, literally, I was able to indoctrinate myself into thinking that I could have sex with Tracy the same way she had with Jackson, just sex and nothing else. After all, she was still a beautiful woman. I wasn't forced to have sex with a troll. It wasn't pretty, but our first night in the saddle set the tone for what was to come over the next few years. We had a date night at one of our favorite Italian establishments, and I poured Tracy 2 more glasses of wine than usual. Well, we had a very good night. Where the hell did that come from? She asked me in a whisper. Holy shit, Bobby! Do I really have to wait another 6 months for a repeat performance? I couldn't answer that question, so I said nothing and ducked my spoon into her back. Admittedly, every time I remembered Tracy with Jackson, I shuddered, and there was nothing tender about our lovemaking then. She seemed to enjoy it, though, and she never complained, though we rarely cuddled or talked softly afterward, as we had before that time. Everything seemed to be back to normal, but every week I had a private investigator come in to make sure she kept her word to me and wasn't dating Jackson or anyone else. I spent a lot of money to get some peace of mind. 6 years later, our youngest child, Terry, left for college at Michigan State. Melissa was a junior at Michigan State, so when Terry made his decision, we had a little war between the kids for the entire summer before they both left for their respective schools. Since Terry was only a freshman, he lived in a dorm on campus, and Tracy and I helped him move in the week before school started. Neither Tracy nor I remembered taking even half of the things Terry took with him. We drove him to Michigan State on Thursday and stayed most of the weekend and left home late Sunday night. Exactly 30 days later, on Tuesday afternoon, I called both kids on the phone and quietly and calmly told them that I was divorcing their mother because she had cheated on me with another man a few years before. They were both devastated. I thought you two were so good together. How could this have happened? Melissa practically screamed into the phone. I always thought we were good together too, but your mother cheated on me with Jackson Aloysius Fairchild 6 years ago when we, along with a few other couples, went there for a 4th of July weekend. She told me she was going to do it first so as not to sneak around behind my back, and then declared that she would remain faithful to me for the rest of our lives together. She didn't see it as cheating, but I did, and then I told her I wasn't going to put up with it. There would be consequences if she went through with it. But apparently she and Jackson had planned it, and she told me that if I left her, not only would she get half of our stuff, but she'd get both of you and turn you both against me. I couldn't lose both of you as well, so I capitulated and just put up with it until you both came of age, and I was sure you'd understand. Terry spoke first. I'll be damned, he exclaimed. Did she give you any reason to set this shit up? Other than the fact that he just wanted to have sex with a man she thought was sexy, it wasn't a big deal. She just figured I'd give in so I wouldn't lose you two, and in some ways she was right. Daddy, is she still hanging around you? Asked Melissa. Not as far as I can tell, babe, I replied. She's had a private investigator following her around a week a month since then, and as far as he can tell, she's kept her promise and hasn't screwed up. Then why can't you forgive her, Dad? Asked Terry uncertainly. You've been married for 22 years and she's only done it once. Once was more than enough, Terry, I said, trying to hold back my growing rage. What love did she feel for me when she spent the night in another man's bed? What respect did she show me when she had sex with him the next morning, and we all heard the two of them doing it together? Forgive me, children. I don't have the strength to forgive her. I stayed with her to keep the family together. I love you guys. Thank you, Dad. We really appreciate you holding things together for us, replied Melissa. Does she know yet? Asked Terry. She'll know about it in a few minutes. She's being served at 4 o'clock in her office. Oh, Daddy, bad move, Melissa said. In front of her boss and co-workers, she'll be crushed and humiliated. Don't do that to her, Daddy. It's too late, baby. Besides, I planned it that way on purpose. Her boss and his wife were among those who were at the lake house when it all went down. And if you think I wasn't humiliated enough as it was, imagine how I felt when your mother started moaning during sex with Jackson the next morning. I wanted to exhale and die. So no, I really want her to feel the sting of humiliation. Although I don't agree with it, Daddy, I guess I understand it, Melissa replied. I'm on board, Dad. I've got your full back, Terry echoed. My cell phone rang at 4:07. Yes, replied I. I'm on my way home, you bastard, and when I get there, I'm going to kick you in the balls until next week, Tracy yelled into the phone. I bet on remorse and tears. Just to show you what I know, I replied before ending the conversation. I sat in the family room watching ESPN until I heard the garage door open and Tracy's car pull up. I turned off the TV and stood up. If she was going to attack me, I wanted to be able to defend myself. I'd never hit a woman up to this point, but I was going to do it if I had to. As usual, Tracy came in through the back room and she looked like she was on fire. She came right up to me until I turned slightly to the right so she couldn't kick me in the balls with her dominant right foot. It's an old fighting move. I also raised both hands in a defensive posture. At this point, Tracy stopped, looked me over from head to toe as if trying to think of a way to hit me, and then collapsed onto the couch in tears. I thought we were doing well. I thought we were fine, she muttered. In all these years, you've never once mentioned divorcing me. You were doing well, so you thought we were doing well, I said calmly. But I kept my promise to you. I hadn't slept with anyone since Jackson at the lake, and I wasn't going to sleep with anyone else. You kept your promise. But 16 years before that, you made a vow to me that you just threw in the trash that night. I asked you not to do it, but you were going to do it anyway and threatened me that you were going to take my children. I couldn't let you do that. It seemed to me that Lou's presence simply completed the circle you began at the lake house 6 years ago. As for the cruelty, your Sunday morning with all of us in the house was the most humiliating moment of my life. You can rest assured I got my revenge. Tracy continued to sob, but I saw a grain of recognition on her face. 6 years ago, you told me that your night with Jackson Aloysius Fairchild was worth it. That it was wonderful. Do you still think that? But I kept my promise. I've been completely faithful to you since then, over 6 years, she whimpered. So how much can you promise? I quickly replied. If your vow is only valid for 16 years, is your promise valid for half as long, say 8 years? Bobby, I'm sorry if this incident is the reason we're getting divorced, but I told you that. I didn't cheat. Yes, it does, I insisted. Just because you told me about it beforehand, rather than sneaking around behind my back, doesn't make it right. We didn't discuss it. You and him. We didn't agree to it. You and him. And then you broke your vows to me. You regret the divorce it led to, but you don't regret the act. You never regretted the deed. I didn't give you a pass. We didn't come to some agreement that you could have a pass. You just gave it to yourself and figured I'd accept your stupid decision. You ripped my heart out that weekend, Tracy, and on the way home you told me it was my problem and I had to deal with it or you'd take my kids away. That sounds like love to you because it sure as hell isn't love to me. She just stared at me stunned. Tracy got herself a good lawyer, and he convinced the judge that we needed to go to couples counseling. At the first session, the counselor, a pretty young woman in her 30s, asked me why I thought I couldn't get over Tracy's cheating, especially since she wouldn't go behind my back and sleep with Jackson. I looked at her like she had two heads, then asked if she'd ever been married, not noticing the ring on her left hand. My marital status has nothing to do with your answer, Mr. Sprague, she said, more than a little defensively. Wrong answer, I said, getting up to leave. Both women sat motionless as I walked away. Later that evening, I got a call from Ron and Judy, Tracy's parents. I loved Tracy's parents very much. My own parents had died a few years ago, and since their deaths, I'd grown even closer to Ron and Judy. They reciprocated me wholeheartedly, but I knew they had to be on their daughter's side in this case. That's what parents do. I haven't spoken to them since Tracy was sued a few weeks ago. They were both on the line on speakerphone. Judy started the conversation after the pleasantries. "Bobby, why are you such an underdog?" she said. "You know Tracy loves you with all her heart. You know she kept her promise to you to never have sex with anyone else ever again. So why are you so uncooperative?" "What exactly did she tell you about that weekend?" I asked. "Well, honey, she told us that you two talked about her having sex with some guy for one night, and then she promised that she would be faithful to you forever. She told us that she told you about it, not sneaking around behind your back like she could have, because she really loves you and doesn't want to lose you." "That's about half the story, Mom. Are you two sitting down?" "Say what you have to say, Bobby." "We're sitting down," her father replied curtly. "We didn't talk about her having sex with Jackson Aloysius Fairchild. She and Jackson talked. I was told that I had no say, that it would happen, and if I wanted to make a fuss, she would take the children and turn them against me. I warned her not to do that, but it didn't make a damn bit of difference. So they had fun that night, and just to make sure they had fun again that morning, when we all sat in the living room until your daughter got too loud and we left for the backyard. I had never been so humiliated in my life until on the way home, Tracy told me how great the sex was." Does that sound like a loving wife? Does that sound like someone who really cares about her husband? To me, no! "But you stayed with her for another 6 years?" her father asked. "No, I stayed with my children for another 6 years. But love began to die that night and continues to die more and more every day. I will never love her the way I once did." I heard Judy crying. "We're sorry, son. We didn't know the whole story," Ron said. "We should have realized it had to be worse for you to just walk away. Thanks for staying all these years for the kids." Tracy and her lawyer tried everything they could to delay the process, and the divorce took about a year. I don't know, maybe Tracy thought I would lose the will to fight and just stay married. She must have known that wasn't going to happen. Although I didn't realize it at the time, being an involved parent while my children were growing up helped me a lot in my social standing and also gave me a glimpse into the personal lives of some other parents. I got to know a lot more divorced people in my age group than I usually do, and used that knowledge to my advantage when my divorce finally became official. I took day trips or went to a restaurant and dance club on weekends, and I almost always had an interesting conversation partner. Many of them were divorced mothers of friends of my children's friends, and others were friends of friends. I guess the old adage that everything is out there if one wants to look proved true. I did have sex more often and with more partners than I had before I was married. Life wasn't bad if you ignored the hole in his heart that Tracy had made. After the divorce, I moved into a 3-bedroom apartment because I wanted my kids to have a place where they could stay with me if they wanted to. I know they were angry with Tracy at first after the divorce, but I figured they would eventually get over it and maybe split time between the two of us until they moved in permanently. For their sake, I hoped that she and Tracy would come to some sort of agreement, but I wasn't going to be the middleman in that deal. Tracy had done bad things to all three of us, and I wasn't going to try to smooth her return to the children's lives. It didn't surprise me that both children chose to live with me during their college vacations, but what did surprise me was how quickly Tracy's parents returned to the family. I heard very little from them during the proceedings, and understandably so, but about 2 months after the divorce became official, Judy called me and asked if I could meet her and Ron for dinner at Maggiano's, a nice Italian restaurant in our town. Considering how well we had gotten along before the divorce, I saw no reason not to go, and the three of us had a great evening. The evening started awkwardly as both Ron and Judy apologized for Tracy's behavior and for any animosity that may have arisen because they were supporting her, at least until they knew the rest of the story, so to speak. I told them that the apology was accepted, and I understood that they were supporting their daughter. I then asked them if we could change the subject, and from that point on, the evening got better, despite the occasional remarks and tears about what might have been. Having Ron and Judy back in my life gave me a sense of normalcy, and I think they enjoyed my company as much as I appreciated theirs. We rarely talked about Tracy, except to reminisce about some events from the past. We got together maybe a couple times a month while the kids were at school, and when they came home, we were together even more often. It was only a matter of time before I introduced a sixth person into our little get-togethers. Amy and I started dating about 18 months after the divorce. By then, I was already dating, not really looking for Miss. Right, when Amy and her friends walked into the restaurant where the kids and I were having dinner on Saturday night. She and 3 of her friends were seated across the table from us, and although I wasn't paying much attention to them, my kids were my first priority. "Hey, Dad, see those women who just sat down?" asked Melissa, panting slightly. "They all look good, and 3 of them aren't wearing wedding rings." "Jesus, Melissa, I don't need you to be my soulmate," I replied. "She's right, Dad. There are a few Watts at the table," Terry added. I looked back. The kids were right. Shit. "Maybe I really do need you as a wingman," I said to Melissa. We finished dinner. I was driving, so I gave the keys to Melissa and told the kids I would find an Uber home. I then walked over and introduced myself at the table to the lovely ladies, who quickly invited me to join them. While they ate, I sipped a shot of Eagle Rare bourbon. "What, did you abandon your children to flirt with us?" "What kind of father are you?" inquired long-haired blonde Jennifer, sitting at a round table 10 hours away from me. "I'm a father who knows his kids have good taste. So when they pointed out that 3 of you weren't wearing wedding rings, I had 2 choices. Go home to watch the baseball game and get a load of crap from those same kids, or come here, maybe make a complete ass of myself, but at least get more respect from the kids. And they always told me that it's just as easy to love a beautiful stepmother as an ugly one." "Gee, big guy," said the married brunette sitting on my second watch. "Nothing special, just a confident guy with 2 bright, chatty kids. And good taste, I should say. So you're the mother here?" They all giggled, even Rose, who I picked on. "And for that, big guy, you get to tell your story to the class first," she replied with a smile. So I told 4 near strangers a Reader's Digest version of my life, quickly recounting my former 17-year marriage and subsequent divorce. "Not good enough, Romeo. If you're such a great guy, how come your wife left?" Angelica, the raven-haired goddess in my 8 o'clock office, asked. "There are 3 of us here who have gone the divorce route, so we want to know if we should even waste our time talking to you." "Straight up, I love it," I replied. For the first time since I got divorced 2 years ago, I put my whole story out there, even the most painful parts of it. Up until then, only Tracy's parents and my divorce lawyer knew the whole story. When I finished my story, it became uncomfortably quiet. There were tears in everyone's eyes. Hell, I had tears in my own eyes. "Well, that's one way to relieve the tension in the room," Carol said, touching my right arm at around 4 o'clock. "I'm sorry, ladies. I try not to dwell on the past. If you look at it from the other side, I have 2 wonderful children, and my parents-in-law are not bad either." "Your relatives?" "You've got to be kidding me," Angelica sighed. "Now you're crossing all the lines of my understanding. No one loves their in-laws that much, especially after a divorce. What can I say? I'm special. If you're done eating, this round of drinks is on me." "It's my turn to hear your stories," I said. We sat through 3 more rounds until I listened to everyone's story. Jennifer got divorced because her spouse was a serial cheater. Angelica and Carol's marriages broke up because of irreconcilable differences. And Rose has been married to the best husband in the world for 26 years. She called him the world's best husband several times, and each time the other 3 nodded their heads in agreement. This is the man I should meet. The women had told me that they had a bachelorette party once a month, so my presence was something of a rule breaker for Rose. But Rose suggested that if she could bring her husband to the next meeting, I could come too if I wanted to. The other 3 quickly agreed. "Can I bring a date?" I asked cheekily. A month later, the 6 of us gathered at the same restaurant. I met Sean, Rose's husband, and came away from the meeting thinking that he really could be the best husband in the world. We instantly hit it off. The 6 of us continued to go out monthly, and I started dating 3 single women as good friends. Sometimes the 4 of us would go out. Sometimes me and one of the women would go on a date. Sometimes we made love. After about a year, Angelica and I became exclusive. I was still good friends with Jennifer and Carol, But everyone understood that exclusivity meant just that, though when the girls got together, the banter sometimes got rough, even for me. My children got used to Angelica quickly. It took a little longer for the relatives to understand her. I realized that and didn't push it. Having a steady girlfriend meant that their faint hopes of reconciling Tracy and me were fading fast. But I think they saw the same thing in Angelica that I did. And since we had become such good friends, I think it was only a matter of time before they felt natural with her and started showing her why I thought so highly of them. After Angelica had been to her parents-in-law's house about half a dozen times, Judy took me aside from the others and said we needed to talk. She looked as serious as a heart attack, so I was a little worried that my marital happiness was about to explode. "Bobby, maybe I don't have the right to say this, but sorry, I'll say it anyway," she began. "How long have you been dating this woman? Don't you think it's time to put a ring on her finger before someone else gets the bright idea?" I tried my best to match the serious expression on her face, but inside I was grinning from ear to ear. When your ex-mother-in-law sees that, well, I guess she was right. "You're right, Mom. I need to lock that girl up. I guess I was a little scary," I said. "Make it quick, big guy," she replied. About 6 weeks later, I invited Angelica back to Maggiano's for her 47th birthday. I told her to dress for the event, and I was presented with her version of a little black dress. Since Angelica couldn't conceive, she had no pregnancies, and her body looked like a 35-year-old's. Her breasts hadn't sagged, and her middle was still taut. I know she also spent a lot of time at the gym, so it wasn't just the lack of children. The dress was about 5 inches above her knees, and it was cut low in the front to show off her lovely 36 cm. My head was spinning all evening, and I barely managed not to choke on my saliva during dinner. We both ordered cheesecake for dessert, and our waiter returned with a tray with 2 slices and a bottle of champagne on it. "We didn't order champagne," Angelica whispered to me. "We didn't." "I did," I whispered back. "It's for drinking right after I put this ring on your finger." After talking to Judy, I went to my favorite jeweler and he made a custom diamond engagement ring for me. I thought he did an excellent job. Apparently, so did Angelica, who cried as soon as she saw it. I'm sure somewhere in the midst of those sobs was a yes. We had a simple spring wedding. Terry was my best man. Rose was Angelica's matron of honor. No, I didn't invite Tracy. Although I know it hurt Ron and Judy, I didn't consider my ex-wife a friend. The only time we were together was when it had to do with the kids. We were cordial when we were together, but unlike some people who can get over a divorce and become friends, it was impossible for me. I couldn't get over the disrespect, and if you don't get over it, you're unlikely to forgive. My kids eventually forgave Tracy, and that's fine with me. She's their mother, but I don't ask about her and my kids don't talk about her willingly. Same with Ron and Judy. When we were all together, Angelica seemed to get along well with Tracy. I don't mind that because Angelica is her own person and can choose who she wants to be friends with. Again, we don't talk about it. Twice after the wedding we got together, at Melissa's wedding and then Terry's. On both occasions, I was a very proud father and wasn't about to let anything distract my children from their big days. The grandchildren came a couple years after the wedding, and that's when I saw a side of Angelica I never thought I would. While Tracy and I were both thrilled to be grandparents, Grandma Angel was just beyond excited. Apparently, she had a lot of maternal itch that needed scratching, so to speak, and the grandkids helped fill that itch. She was ridiculous. Tracy eventually remarried, and then divorced again, and then got married a 3rd time, and divorced a 3rd time. Angelica told me that she thought Tracy was looking for another version of me, but couldn't find one. She wanted me to promise her I'd never leave her. "I don't need to promise you that," I replied. "I made a vow to you,"